Hi, I'm Gary. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm looking at the brand new 2025 release of the Sepecat Jaguar GR1 in 1/48 scale from Airfix. A lot of people have wasted a lot of time for this kit. Let's have a look at what all the fuss is about. We'll start with the box it comes in. So here at last is my Airfix 1/48 scale Sepecat Jaguar GR1 GR1A. The product code for this is A11010, which means it's a Series 11 kit. On the side here we have warnings in many languages, we have some recycling symbols. Don't let this anywhere near children under 3 years of age, and it's aimed at children who are 8 or more years old. It says here, made in India. Of course, it's modern in India. Almost everything is. The good part is that the decals, as usual, are made by Cassegraph, which is good because they're pretty much the best there is. On the other long side, there's a history of the aircraft here. There's a little bit here which is quite important. It says the length, when it's complete, will be 348 millimeters with a span of 181 millimeters, and there are 243 pieces, not all of which you'll need for the construction of your aircraft. There are 4 schemes available, A, B, C and D. We'll go into these in a bit more detail, but as you can see, these are essentially Northern Temperate, and this is a desert scheme from Desert Storm in 1991. Over here we have paint callouts in Humbrol codes. Of course, they're not included. And over here we have a token for 4 flying hours, reference to the Airfix Club, and the fact that this is skill level 4, which is the highest level that Airfix rates it. The flying hours token here, if you haven't seen these before, this is, if you are a member of the Airfix Club, you can collect these towards a free kit in the future. If you aren't a member of the club, or if you are a member of the club and you don't collect them, you might want to think about maybe sending these to Models for Heroes, because they can turn them into kits that help former members of our armed forces and Blue Light Emergency Services with their mental health. It's a great charity. A link to Models for Heroes is in the information box below. Okay, well, we can have another look at the wonderful Adam Tooby box art and stare at it lovingly for ages, but then maybe let's have a look and see what we get inside the box. The thing you can see quite clearly actually here is this sort of corrugation comes through. These boxes are corrugated to try and give them a bit more strength and relative lightness. Inside, my first thought when I opened this was, where is everything? But there's still quite a lot of it. It doesn't seem very full this way compared with that way, but all the parts are there. Anyway, as usual, a couple of plastic PVC, I guess, bags. In fact, 3 of them for this kit, and that's the whole lot. There is, of course, your instruction sheet. There is a series of decal and colouring sheets and the decals themselves. But we'll have a look at all of this in a bit more detail now. Frames A1 and A2 are the 2 fuselage halves. These are essentially from the back of the cockpit to the rear of the aircraft. The forward fuselage is different. That is because in the future there will be other versions, including presumably the trainer version, that will have a very different front end. But anyway, this is a common fuselage halves A1 and A2. Frame B has the upper and lower parts of the wings. It has 2 types of fin, with and without the early warning receiver, and a fillet that goes in there on both of these. This is the GR1, early GR1, and the French Jaguar A tail. There's also the all-flying stabilators there, and 2 pilot figures, which again sort of hints at them having a trainer in the future. Frame C here consists of the flaps and slats, the stabilizer fins that go underneath the rear of the aircraft, engine exhausts here, and the engine inlets here. Frame D, this concerns itself with mainly the gear bays and nose gear bay, main gear bays, undercarriage legs, and they're quite a fiddly undercarriage, the wheels themselves, gear bay doors, and the air brakes here. Frames E, F and G all appear on the same piece of plastic because they haven't been separated out, which they normally would be. Frame E, lots of probes and radio antennae and things like that. Frame F here these are fuel tanks, one of which has fallen off, but I do have it, and the fins to the fuel tanks, weapons pylons. And G, get it around this way, maybe it looks better, has the two ejection seats. Now, the two ejection seats, not because they will use this in the future with the 2C aircraft, but because there are two marks of ejection seat supplied depending on the age of the aircraft. Therefore, there are different seat pans, and the initiators are up here, things like that. So you can make two different types of ejection seat, different models of ejection seat. I think they're both Mark 9s from memory, but I think the Model 2 and the Model 3. So anyway, that's what these three frames in one consist of. Then finally, in frame H, we have the two halves of the nose section. We have, this is the chisel nose, which has the laser rangefinder in the front. You can have it with the pointy nose rather, the GR1 before they put in the laser rangefinder, but there's a jig here to cut it to the right size so that those can go on the front if you want to do that. There's the cockpit tub, the rear of the cockpit, the instrument panel, weapons, so Sidewinder missiles for the Gulf War one. There's an ECM pod, Alki 101, things like that over here, and some bombs if you want them for these, particularly for the center line. What interests me is there are 4 bombs, and I think there are only 2 nose decals, but anyway, we'll have a look at that then. Side panels here for the instruments, and of course the other side of the cockpit there. There are also 2 clear frames. The first of these is frame M for Mike. These are just some covers for navigation lights and things like that, and these are the covers for the landing lights that fit on the nose gear door. And then there's frame P. So here we have the windscreen and canopy, of course, the heads-up display glass, and 2 nose items. This is, I don't know what nose this is, maybe this is a French one. It's not being used in this kit anyway. And there's the chisel nose for the British GR1A version. Okay, if we have a look at the plastic parts here, you can see the panel lines here are okay. They're not really subtle, but they're not massive either. They'll do. They're okay. They'll sort of weather nicely and come up nicely. The edges of the parts don't seem to have that much in the way of flash, which is nice. If you go to the this probe here, you can see there is some flash on that, but you know, it's not the end of the world. But it will be to Trump. It is a bit more annoying when it's on something really flimsy part like that, where it's going to be, if you try sort of sanding that off, you'll probably break the end of it. So that's a little annoying. If we have a look up here, we can see the, get the focus again. That's the cabin, that's the rear bulkhead of the cockpit. And then there's the main instrument panel. Now you can see we've got a lot of instruments here, and there's an awful lot of relief. So I'll probably just stick with the instruments there and the Navwaz screen there, and the rest I'll dry brush, I think. There's just too much relief in there, and it's the same for these side panels. Now, you remember me showing you that the decals, look at the amount of relief on the throttles here, and the levers here and here as well. These stand out so much, there's no way you're going to get those decals to really nicely sit on those. So either you're going to cut those out and use the decal on the rest of it, or you're going to dry brush it. I'm probably going to dry brush mine, because I'll have the cockpit shut down, so you know it's relatively little detail will be able to be seen through the glass anyway, all the plastic, I should say. But again, this is a lot of relief. This one might work with the decals that are provided. This one with this large throttle here, that is not going to sit very nicely. I thought for earlier on there are 4 bombs. There are actually only 2 bombs. The difference is in the tail. So you've got 2 bombs like this and 2 bombs like this. I think one's a free. I think this is the free fall bomb, and this is a retarded bomb. So it's probably got like a parachute or a balloon or something that comes out the back. Let's have a look at some of the other parts. The main surface of the wing looks pretty good to me. There will be people who have opinion about how deep these rivets should look or should be. But to me, as a modeler, I think these are going to be grand. I think these are going to be fun. They're not too deep. I'm trying to make them look as deep as possible so you can see them. But when you actually look face on, you can see they don't really show that much. You need some real sort of side light to pick them out where everything is. But it all looks quite good. Nice sharp edges there. Where I'm really not happy with these pilots. They're just sitting there with their hands on their knees. Now, I know if you want the pilot to actually be posed, so like he's holding the control column or the throttles, then you need to have more parts. You can't do it in a single two-sided mold. You have to either use side molds or you have to use multiple parts. And it's probably a parts count issue and a parts count budget that means that you can't do it. But I don't know, they just look a bit sort of sad, really, not actually doing anything of any real value, just sort of sitting there with their hands on their knees. I know you wouldn't have this as a flying one because you'll just be sort of on autopilot somewhere, not actually doing anything interesting. The molds are not too bad, I have to say. They're not bad really, but I don't know. Given what they've done with the Lysander, for example, recently, I would have hoped for some slightly better crew figures than these. But there we go. The other thing I would say relative to the pilots is that if you're not using pilots, you don't have any option for seats. It would have been easy, because these seat parts are inserts, to have an option of a plain one for putting the pilot in, or one with straps on there and on the PSP pack that you sit on. You could have the straps on those, moulded on those, as optional parts. I would have thought, if you've gone to the trouble of moulding 2 completely different seats, then that sort of thing could have been done. But again, it's probably a parts count decision that was made and these lost out. So if you're going to have these with no one in, then you're going to probably have to either make your own strap or wait until someone does some photo etch to put in. The decal sheet follows the usual layout from Airfix, which is a very, very good one. So all the common markings and stencils are up in one part. Then bits for individual aircraft are sort of collated together within little lines. So you have the A scheme here, the B scheme here, C scheme here, and the D scheme along the bottom. If we have a close-up look at the decals, you can see they're extremely sharp, beautifully printed, colour registration is spot on. These are cartograph, what can I say? The colours are lovely because they use multiple screens of spot colour rather than doing CMYK print. So the colours are very rich, very true, and very stable, and the prints tend to be very sharp. You can see from the instrument panel here, the side panels here, which I'm going to use for reference because they're just too annoying for words. You can see here the warning triangles, all absolutely crystal clear. Really nice. Colours of the roundels and the tail fins, spot on. The yellow of the stores and the yellow and brown of the missiles here. These are slightly annoying because these are the fuel tank markings and they're big individual decals, which means all these bits in the middle are just absolutely home for silvering, which is really annoying if you're trying to do a model, especially if you haven't made many of them, and just get masses of silvering under these. So you have to be really, really careful about how you apply these particular ones. I think it's the same with the no step panels here. They're very large individual decals rather than being anywhere near cut to the size of the actual lines. Plenty of markings for squadrons here, and there's some nose art as well. Interesting choice from the Viz cartoons of Buster Gonad. The raid markings as well there, and all the RF Germany markings in German and in English. As usual, these are absolutely spot on colour, the spot on registration of print. They're really, really nice decals. The instruction book is, as usual, with current Airfix layouts, exactly the same pretty much. Again, reprise of the name, scale, the product code, and the size, span, fuselage length, and the fact there are 4 decal schemes. There's a reprise also of the information that was on the side, a brief history of the aircraft. They've added some specifications here as well, and this is in English and French and German on the inside. It's in Spanish and Swedish as well, as we'll find here, Spanish and Swedish, and some very sort of general assembly instructions in many languages, and a translation of the icons that are used as well. Now, the first thing we come across on the instructions is the range of weapons layouts that are available. It's slightly confusing that they provide 4 bombs when these only use 2. But anyway, that's maybe for a later version, more heavily armed version, maybe one with Matra rocket pods or BL-755s as well, things like that. But this aircraft can have the overwing sidewinders for the Desert Storm aircraft. Underneath the wings, you've got the big 1200 litre fuel tanks. If you wish, you can have a Sentinel recce pod, a couple of bombs, and on the outer stations here, the FIMAT here and the Alki 101 there. I guess you want to get that out of the way first, because then you can decide what bits you need to drill later on. There's a useful thing here, which is like the placement of the interior decals. Here you can see the Type 9B Mark II and Mark III ejection seats, the 2 types of ejection seats. Details of things like the side console, where there's a little thing here on the window, the canopy frame, tiny little decals that go on the main legs of the undercarriage, for example. But the one that most people would be interested in are the instrument panel here and the side panels here. We'll look at these. Just remember that these are decals here, and we'll look at the side panels later on. You can see why I think this is nonsense. But anyway, we'll see. There's also 2 colour schemes for the pilots. The pilots in Desert Storm had a sand colour flying uniform. Still had the olive green anti-G suit trousers. But anyway, we'll see how we go with that. I won't be putting a pilot in, as we'll see. And yeah, there's just general instructions the way Airfix have done it for ages and ages now. The red is used to highlight things you've done in previous steps. Manufacture the ejection seats here, as you can see. So yeah, version C is what we'll be doing. The Mark III ejection seats will be here. So these are the 3 things you need to. Quite often, once I've decided what scheme I'm doing or what weapons load I'm doing, I'll go and actually sort of scribble out the bits I don't need, so I only need to worry about the ones I do need to do. Lots of decals for the seats, which is actually kind of nice. A decent little initiator handle at the bottom there. Then inside we start making the nose wheel section. The cockpit sticks onto that. There's some work you do on the inside. And here you see this bit here, the purple. These are the jigs you use to chop off the front end of the chisel nose if you're going to be using the needle nose of the Mark 1. Otherwise, you would leave that alone and put the chisel nose piece in here. It all looks fairly straight. There's a lot of bits where you have to cut off these ejection posts, which is, again, kind of interesting. Undercarriage bays go in. Here it says, make sure these holes are aligned. Well, you know, if these two halves are aligned properly, that's, you know, you've got locator pins here. So those should be aligned anyway, but you have to make sure they are. There are plenty of options of bits and pieces you can use and not use, whatever. Setting the rear strakes, the underbody strakes. The inlets also have a part to act as a template to hold them whilst they set, which is kind of interesting. I think maybe they're very thin faces and they don't want to have larger faces to have actual alignment posts. I'm guessing that's the issue there. And they go on, again, here you can drill 1mm holes, 1mm holes there. Excellent for various bits and pieces. That's only for A and D, so I won't be doing that. Here they say, you know, about fixing the two wing halves together, then putting on the fuselage and clamping it and leaving it for an hour to set. Obviously, there must be some sort of give or flex in there. The thing that annoys me, and it's not just Airfix that does this, it's a lot of companies. Right? You've got 1mm holes there. So why do you want 0.9mm holes drilled there using this jig? Is it a scale thing? In which case, why not use 0.9 for these as well? So you don't have to have loads of different bits and pieces of jig. It's just too confusing. Then a 0.7mm in there. And if they're scaling the holes of the aircraft, fine. But you know, sometimes just seems a bit superfluous. Anyway, exhaust cans here look all very nice. Actually, look very good looking exhaust system. What I will be doing on this is doing a metal, sort of a proper metal finish there, so I won't be putting those in until I've sprayed the aircraft and then done the metal around the resonance plates there, and then I'll do those separately and then put them in right at the last minute, as it were. The wing fences here, I won't be using those. I'll be using the ones with the rail for the sidewinders. We have here the flaps. I will have mine deployed. I'll have the slats deployed as well, just because I tend to like it looking like that. They're quite complicated undercarriage here and here. Then the doors, you can have various doors open or closed. I'm guessing a lot of them, say these doors here on the main gear, probably open to allow the gear to extend and then close, but then you have them open on the ground maybe for maintenance or whatever. Nose gear door has a couple of lights in it, which is nice, the landing lights. And all these bits and pieces carry on. And then you've got the pilot goes in, you've got a little heads-up display glass, and then you've got the canopies. And then after that, you've got the weapons rails and all the stores that go on. They do say put all the decals under the wings before you put the stores on, which makes a lot of sense. And eventually, there it all is when it's all done. We've got these really annoying two-part missiles. I'm sure they won't work very well, but we'll see. Give them the benefit of the doubt, Gary. So that's the instructions. Then we have some full colour sheets here, printed sheets, to show you the schemes and also the decal layouts for each aircraft. You do have FOD guards on for the intakes, which is nice as well, which they say there. Anyway, let's have a look. This is for an aircraft of 54 Fighter Squadron, RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland in 1974. This is a top and side camouflage, the bottom was. light grey. You can see, interestingly, the interior of the undercarriage bays are all zinc chromate yellow, which is kind of weird, but there we go. And on this side is Scheme B, which is an aircraft of 6th Squadron, RAF Coltishall in Norfolk, 1990 to 1994. Again, this is a wraparound now scheme, which is very nice. I think a lot of people are doing the wraparound schemes, I suspect. Scheme C is one I'll be doing, which is an aircraft of the Jaguar detachment, Jagdet, in Operation Granby or Desert Storm in Bahrain in October to March 1990 to 1991. So all over desert sand, US desert sand. I'm tempted to do a bit of pre-shade with a brown underneath the desert sand, and then do some little bits of UK desert pink just where the desert sand would be wearing out a little bit, just to give it a bit of tonal variation. All the weapons are, of course, coloured in the same way. The fire mat, the Alki 101 and the fuel tanks are all in that scheme as well. And then the last one is Scheme D, Jaguar from RAF Larborough in 1976 of Number 2 Army Cooperation Squadron, Number 2 Squadron RAF. And again, it's a wraparound scheme that looks very, very smart. The other sheet we have is a list of the stencil placings and colourings for the external stores. So fuel tanks, pods, bombs, and the fire mat over here, and ECM and sidewinders, things like that. Well, there it is. It looks very good overall. Apart from a few niggles, I'm not impressed that for the needle nose you need to actually chop off some of the chisel nose rather than there being a separate parts for each. I'm not a fan of the lack of seat belts if you're not having a pilot inside. And I don't like the pilot figures. They look too simple to me. Compared with those supplied for the example, the Lysander, they're pretty basic and unposed. However, I suspect all of these things would have meant a bigger parts count, which in its turn means either having to leave something else out or being more expensive. It's a call they regularly have to make. That said, it is exciting to have the new Jaguar in a brand new tooling at this scale, and I look forward to making it. I look forward even more to the two-seat trainer when it finally arrives. If you've enjoyed this review, please do remember, give it the old Imperial thumbs up, hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel. It's free and a great way to show your support. Thanks so very much for watching today, and goodbye.